You wake up every morning with a choice. Will today be shaped by the chaos around you or by the strength within you? Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength. That's the essence of Stoicism, and it's the foundation of what we're about to explore together. This isn't just philosophy, it's a blueprint for radical transformation. Imagine a life where setbacks don't break you, distractions don't derail you, and fear doesn't control you. That's the power of Stoic strategies, and over the next few minutes, you'll learn how to wield them like a warrior. Think about the last time life threw something at you that felt impossible to handle. Maybe it was a loss, a failure, or a moment of overwhelming pressure. Here's the truth. The obstacle wasn't the problem, it was your perception of it. Stoicism teaches us that resilience isn't about avoiding hardship. It's about refining your response to it. This video is your toolkit for turning adversity into advantage, confusion into clarity, and hesitation into unshakable action. We're diving deep into the principles that fueled history's greatest leaders, from emperors to entrepreneurs, and how you can apply them to rewrite your own story. This isn't about suppressing emotions or pretending life is easy. It's about mastering the art of focus, discipline, and intentional living. Picture a version of yourself who meets challenges with calm determination, who thrives under pressure, and who builds an unbreakable mindset, one decision at a time. That's the journey we're starting today. Whether you're facing a personal struggle, a professional hurdle, or simply want to take control of your destiny, these Stoic strategies will arm you with the tools to reshape your world. Ready to transform not just how you think, but how you live? Let's begin. The Stoic mindset isn't about brute force or loud declarations. It's the quiet, unshakable power of knowing what's yours to control and what isn't. Picture a ship in a storm. The captain can't command the waves to calm, but he can adjust the sails, steady the rudder, and keep his crew focused. That's the dichotomy of control in action. Epictetus, the former slave who became one of Stoicism's greatest teachers, put it bluntly, "Some things are up to us and some things are not. Your thoughts, your actions, your choices, those are your domain. The weather, other people's opinions, the past, those belong to the storm." Take the story of James Stockdale, the Navy pilot shot down over Vietnam. For 7 years, he endured torture and isolation as a prisoner of war. He couldn't control his captors or his circumstances, but he could control how he responded. Stockdale credited Stoicism for his survival, saying it taught him to focus only on what he could influence, his own resilience, his refusal to break. That's the Stoic mindset in its purest form, not denying hardship, but refusing to let it dictate your inner world. Now, bring that into your life. When your boss criticizes your work, or traffic derails your plans, or life throws an unexpected curveball, ask yourself, is this within my control? If it is, act. If it isn't, release it. This isn't passivity, it's precision. Every ounce of energy wasted on the uncontrollable is energy stolen from where you could truly make a difference. The modern world bombards us with distractions, demands, and drama, but Stoicism hands you a filter. It's the art of saying, this matters, that doesn't. Think of a time you stressed over something you couldn't change, a delayed flight, a rude comment, a missed opportunity. Now imagine if you'd poured that same energy into something you could shape, your next move, your attitude, your growth. That shift is where real power lies. The Stoics didn't just preach this, they lived it. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire but wrote reminders to himself about staying grounded. Seneca faced exile and betrayal but chose to see them as chances to practice wisdom. This mindset isn't reserved for warriors or emperors. It's for anyone tired of feeling tossed around by circumstance. When you internalize the dichotomy of control, you stop being a passenger in your own life. You become the captain, not because the storm disappears, but because you've mastered the art of sailing through it. Freedom sounds like something you win by breaking rules, but the Stoics flipped that idea on its head. Seneca called discipline the path to true liberation. Think about that for a second. The person who masters their impulses, their time, their focus, isn't constrained by discipline, they're freed by it. While motivation comes and goes like the weather, discipline is the foundation you build your life upon. Take Seneca's own life. As one of Rome's wealthiest men, he could have indulged every whim, yet he practiced voluntary hardship, sleeping on hard beds, eating simple meals, testing his self-control. Why? Because he knew luxury without discipline is just another cage. Modern research backs this up. Studies show people with high self-control report more happiness, not less. They spend less time battling procrastination, regretting impulsive choices, or feeling trapped by bad habits. Discipline isn't deprivation, it's the ultimate cheat code. Here's where most people stumble. They try to overhaul everything at once, waking up at 4 in the morning, cutting out sugar, meditating for an hour, only to burn out in a week. The Stoics would have called that arrogance. Real discipline starts microscopically. Miss a workout, do one push-up, can't focus, write one sentence. The power isn't in the scale of the action, but in the consistency. Every small win trains your brain to trust itself, building what the ancients called hegemonikon, the commanding faculty of your mind. So ask yourself, where's your life leaking energy? Is it the 30 minutes lost to social media first thing in the morning? The excuses for skipping your reading? The impulse purchases that drain your savings? Identify one leak, then plug it with a ritual so simple it feels almost silly. Floss one tooth, read one page. Save $1. These are your daily drills, the reps that forge unbreakable discipline. Marcus Aurelius had a mantra: waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. That's the heart of Stoic discipline. Less talk, more action. While others wait for inspiration, you'll be operating on a different frequency. Not because you're punishing yourself, but because you've tasted the freedom that comes when your actions finally match your ambitions. The road to mastery isn't a sprint. It's 1,000 tiny steps taken without fanfare. Start stepping. What if the very thing you fear most could become your greatest source of strength? The Stoics practiced something called negative visualization, not to dwell on darkness, but to disarm it. Picture this: instead of anxiously avoiding thoughts of failure, loss, or hardship, you deliberately walk through them in your mind. Seneca wrote to his friend Lucilius, "He robs present ills of their power who has perceived their coming beforehand." This isn't pessimism, it's emotional armor. Take Seneca's own routine. Each morning, he'd pause to mentally rehearse losing his wealth, his status, even his loved ones. Sounds grim, right? But here's the twist. By confronting these possibilities head-on, he stripped them of their power to shock him. When Emperor Nero later ordered his exile, Seneca wasn't shattered. He'd already lived through it in his mind and discovered something profound. The worst-case scenario was never as terrifying as the uncertainty surrounding it. Modern psychology calls this stress inoculation. Navy SEAL use a similar tactic in Hell Week, anticipating freezing water, sleep deprivation, and brutal drills until the brain stops reacting with panic. The principle is identical. Familiarity breeds resilience. When you've mentally weathered a storm, the real thing feels like territory you've already mapped. Try this for 1 week. Pick a quiet moment each day to ask, What if the project fails? What if the relationship ends? What if the plan falls apart? Sit with those questions not to spiral into worry, but to strategize. You'll notice two shifts. First, the sharp edges of fear start to dull. Second, you begin spotting solutions you'd never see while avoiding the topic altogether. The Roman general Scipio Africanus used to visit the graves of his ancestors before major battles, reminding himself that death was inevitable, morbid. Maybe, but it's also why he fought with unmatched clarity, freed from the paralysis of what if. Negative visualization has a paradoxical effect. By regularly visiting the depths in your imagination, you stop fearing the fall. And when life does knock you down, as it will, you're not lying there stunned, wondering how this could happen. You're already reaching for the next handhold. That's the art of turning dread into preparation, and preparation into unshakable confidence. The Stoics didn't just endure hardship, they rehearsed for it. And that rehearsal, that's what makes the performance fearless. Marcus Aurelius faced rebellions, plagues, and betrayals during his reign, yet his private writings reveal a startling perspective. The obstacle is the way. Not a platitude, but a principle. What if every setback, every frustration, every detour wasn't blocking your path but becoming the path? That's Amorfati, the Stoic art of loving fate. Not just accepting what happens, but embracing it as if you'd chosen it yourself. Consider the story of Epictetus, born into slavery, his leg deliberately broken by a cruel master. He could have defined his life by that injustice. Instead, he taught, lameness is an impediment to the leg, but not to the will. His disability didn't vanish, but his relationship to it transformed. By reframing his suffering as the forge that shaped his philosophy, he turned what could have been a life of bitterness into one of enduring influence, his teachings still guiding minds 2,000 years later. Here's the radical shift. Amorfati isn't about pretending pain doesn't hurt. It's about recognizing that within every hardship lies a hidden curriculum. When your job feels stagnant, that's your invitation to innovate or pivot. When a relationship fractures, it's space for deeper self-understanding. Even failure becomes data, revealing where to adjust your approach. The Stoics called this the art of the turning move, like a judo master using an opponent's momentum to their advantage. Take Thomas Edison's lab burning to the ground in 1914. As flames consumed years of work, he told his son, "Go get your mother, she'll never see a fire like this again." Then he rebuilt better. Why? Because the fire forced him to reevaluate designs, discard outdated ideas, and start fresh with sharper clarity. That's Amorfati in action, not just bouncing back, but leaping forward because of the destruction. So ask yourself tonight, what's one challenge you're resisting right now? A financial strain, a health hurdle, a creative block. Now imagine whispering to it, what if I needed you, not as a surrender, but as a strategy? When you stop fighting reality and start mining it for lessons, obstacles cease to be roadblocks. They become the very terrain that shapes your strength, the resistance that builds your resilience. Zeno of Citium, the founder of Stoicism, lost everything in a shipwreck before founding his philosophy. Had that ship sailed safely, he might have lived and died an anonymous merchant. The storm that seemed to ruin him actually rerouted his destiny. Your struggles aren't deviations from your path, they're sculpting it. The Stoics didn't just endure fate, they fell in love with its rough hands, because those hands, however harsh, are the ones carving your best self. In a world that never stops talking, the Stoics understood something revolutionary. Silence isn't empty space, it's the birthplace of wisdom. Epictetus put it plainly, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth so we can listen twice as much as we speak. But he wasn't just talking about conversations with others. The real battleground is the chatter inside your own head. Imagine your mind as a crowded marketplace, voices shouting opinions, fears replaying past mistakes, distractions peddling cheap thrills. The Stoic practice of stillness isn't about escaping that noise. It's about becoming the guard at the gate, deciding which thoughts get in and which get turned away. Think of Marcus Aurelius, ruler of the Roman Empire at its peak, yet beginning each morning in total solitude. No advisors, no petitions, just a notebook and his own thoughts. He called this his morning preparation, a ritual where he reminded himself of his principles before facing the chaos of the day. Contrast that with how most of us start our mornings now, reaching for phones, drowning in notifications, letting the world's agenda colonize our minds before we've even had a chance to remember our own. The difference isn't just habit, it's strategy. Stillness isn't passive. It's the reset button that keeps you from becoming a puppet of other people's demands. Here's the challenge the Stoics would issue to our modern world. When was the last time you sat in pure silence for even 5 minutes? Not meditation with an app guiding you, not background music, just you and the raw space of your own mind. That discomfort you feel isn't boredom, it's withdrawal from a society addicted to stimulation. The ancient Stoics didn't have social media, but they understood the same human tendency to flee from quiet. Seneca warned his students about the dangers of being everywhere but nowhere, constantly surrounded by crowds yet never truly alone with their thoughts. Start small, 1 minute a day, sit with your eyes closed and do nothing but observe your breath. Don't try to clear your mind, that's like trying to calm waves by shouting at the ocean. Instead, watch the thoughts float by like clouds, labeling them without judgment, planning, remembering, worrying. This isn't just meditation, it's mental weightlifting. Every time you notice distraction and gently return to focus, you're strengthening what the Stoics called prosach attention, the root of all self-mastery. The irony, in an age where we have more tools for communication than ever, genuine understanding feels scarcer. The Stoics practiced silence not to escape the world, but to engage with it more deeply. Like a photographer who steps back to adjust the lens, stillness brings life into sharper focus. When you stop reacting to every mental impulse, you start noticing patterns, how certain triggers spark anger, how comfort zones masquerade as limits. That's when silence transforms from absence into presence, from emptiness into your most powerful teacher. Epictetus gave his students a brutal but liberating question. If you were deaf and mute, what would you lose by not hearing gossip or participating in idle talk? His point wasn't to isolate them, but to reveal how much of our mental energy gets wasted on what doesn't matter. Try this experiment for one evening, mute all notifications and sit with a book of philosophy or poetry instead of scrolling. You'll discover something startling. The world continues without your constant input, and your mind begins to reclaim territory it didn't know it had lost. The next time you're tempted to fill a quiet moment with noise, wait, let the silence stretch. That's where the Stoics found their clarity and where you'll find yours. Not in more information, but in the space between thoughts, not in speaking, but in listening to the voice that's been there all along, the one that knows exactly who you're capable of becoming. Anger flashes hot, regret lingers cold. Seneca knew this cycle better than most. In his essay on anger, he described rage as brief insanity, a temporary madness that leaves wreckage in its wake. But here's the Stoic secret: between the spark of provocation and the explosion of reaction, there's a sliver of space, and in that space, your power. Picture this: your coworker takes credit for your idea in a meeting. Your pulse spikes, your face flushes, and every muscle tenses to fire back. That's the stimulus. What happens next isn't automatic, it's a choice. The Stoics called this gap the Discipline of Assent, the moment you decide whether to fuel the fire or let it burn out. Modern science confirms this ancient insight. Researchers at New York University found that the brain's emotional amygdala reacts to provocation in milliseconds, but the prefrontal cortex, the rational brake system, takes a full 6 seconds to fully engage. 6 seconds, that's your Stoic pause. Seneca advised his students to imitate nature's rhythms. When you're angry, walk. When you're wounded, wait. When you're tempted, count. He wasn't promoting suppression, he was teaching strategic delay. Like a gardener refusing to water weeds, you starve impulsive reactions by refusing to feed them attention. Consider the CEO who fired an employee in a fit of anger, only to discover later the employee was covering for a colleague's medical emergency, or the parent who snapped at a crying child, not realizing they were in pain. These aren't just moral failures, they're practical ones. The Stoics measured actions by their consequences, not their intentions. As Seneca wrote, no tree becomes rooted and sturdy unless it withstands frequent winds. Your impulses are those winds. Your pause is the root system growing stronger with every storm. So where do you most need to insert a Stoic pause? Is it when notifications hijack your focus? When someone cuts you off in traffic, when self-doubt whispers that you should quit? Try this tonight. Replay one moment today where impulse won. Now rewrite it. What if you'd taken 6 breaths, 6 steps, 6 seconds to ask, will this action serve me or enslave me? The pause isn't passivity, it's precision targeting. Epictetus, born into slavery, had every reason to rage against his oppressors. Instead, he taught, if someone irritates you, it's your own opinion irritating you. Here's the modern twist. Your brain's pause button is muscles deep. When anger flares, clench your fists tightly for 5 seconds, then release. That physical reset cues the mental one. Or borrow Marcus Aurelius' mantra. Ask yourself, what is this to me? Not as dismissal, but as clarification. The insult, the slight, the frustration, they're just data. Your response is the algorithm. The next time emotion surges, don't wrestle it, stand still. Let it crash over you like a wave, intense but temporary. In that stillness, you'll find what the Stoics promised, not the absence of feeling, but the mastery of it, because control isn't about never getting knocked off balance. It's about learning how to regain your footing before you fall. Assertive communication in Stoicism is neither passive nor aggressive. It's the razor's edge between submission and domination. Picture Marcus Aurelius addressing rebellious generals. No raised voice, no threats, just unshakable clarity. He wrote in his meditations, "Speak both in the Senate and to every man, whoever he may be, appropriately, not with any affectation." That's the Stoic ideal, words that carry weight without needing to shout, boundaries that stand firm without requiring rage. Modern psychology defines assertiveness as expressing your needs while respecting others. The Stoics would have added, and without being hostage to their reactions, when Epictetus taught, if someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation. He wasn't suggesting silence in the face of injustice. He was revealing the secret to speaking with power, detaching your self-worth from the outcome. Think of a judge delivering a verdict, calm, precise, unconcerned with whether the defendant likes the ruling. That's Stoic assertiveness. Consider how Marcus handled his adoptive brother Lucius Verus, a co-emperor more interested in parties than governance. Instead of public shaming or passive tolerance, Marcus set clear expectations. Attend meetings, review troop deployments, fulfill your duties. When Lucius failed, Marcus didn't explode. He reassigned responsibilities to competent officials. No drama, no resentment, just action. Contrast this with how we often communicate. either bottling up frustrations until they erupt or weaponizing words to win arguments. The Stoic model asks, what if your words weren't about victory but integrity? Try this reframe next time a conversation turns tense. Before speaking, ask the Stoic triad. 1. Is this true, not exaggerated or emotionally charged? 2. Is this necessary? Will it improve the situation or just vent emotion? 3. Is this kind, not soft, but free from cruelty? You'll find most conflicts shrink when subjected to this filter. The key lies in preparation. Seneca advised rehearsing difficult conversations in advance, not to script responses but to stabilize emotions. Imagine you're requesting a raise. A reactive approach might oscillate between nervous hesitation, maybe next quarter, and defensive demands, I deserve this. The Stoic version, state facts plainly. These are my contributions, this is the market rate, I'd like to align them. If refused, the response isn't anger, it's a calm reassessment of options. Notice the through line here. Assertive communication isn't a tactic. It's the outward expression of an inner discipline. When your self-esteem isn't tied to others' approval, you can say no without guilt. When your worth isn't threatened by disagreement, you can hear no without crumbling. That's why the Stoics invested so deeply in self-awareness, because the clearest communication flows from the calmest mind. Your challenge today: pick one interaction where you typically default to aggression or avoidance. Maybe it's a pushy relative or a dismissive colleague. Approach it this time as a Stoic would, not to control their reaction, but to honor your own principles. Speak concisely, stand by your boundaries, and release attachment to their response. That's true assertive might, the quiet confidence of someone who knows their words need no armor. The Stoics didn't wait for life to force hardship upon them. They voluntarily stepped into discomfort like athletes training for a marathon of the mind. This practice, called ascesis, wasn't about masochism, it was about immunization. Imagine building a firebreak in your psyche by deliberately exposing yourself to small, controlled burns. Cato the Younger, a Roman senator known for his iron will, would walk through Rome in winter wearing only a thin tunic, not because he enjoyed shivering, but because he wanted to prove to himself that hardship was a choice, not a prison. Take the modern equivalent: sleeping on the floor once a week, taking cold showers, or fasting for a day. These aren't punishments, they're rehearsals. When you willingly embrace minor discomforts, you rewrite your brain's relationship to adversity. Neuroscience backs this ancient wisdom. Studies show that voluntary exposure to stress, like cold therapy or intermittent fasting, increases the brain's production of BDNF, a protein that strengthens neural resilience. The Stoics were essentially biohackers, using discipline as their lab. Consider the story of Zeno, founder of Stoicism, who lost his entire fortune in a shipwreck. Stranded in Athens with nothing, he could have crumbled. Instead, he wandered into a bookstore, discovered philosophy, and later said, "I made a prosperous voyage when I suffered shipwreck." That shift from victim to student wasn't luck. It was the fruit of a mind trained to see opportunity in ruin. Here's your challenge: pick one comfort that's softening your edge. Is it the snooze button, the constant scroll of social media, the extra portion you don't need but always take? For 1 week, remove it, not as deprivation but as discovery. Notice what arises: irritation, boredom, anxiety. Those emotions are the rust on your inner armor. The voluntary discomfort practice isn't about the act itself. It's about the space it creates between stimulus and response. When you habitually choose the harder path in small things, the bigger obstacles feel like familiar terrain. Musonius Rufus, the Stoic teacher who tutored Epictetus, put it bluntly: how can someone become brave if they only seek comfort? He wasn't advocating suffering for its own sake. He was pointing to a profound truth: courage is a muscle, and comfort is the weight that strengthens it. The modern world offers endless escapes from discomfort: fast food, instant entertainment, climate-controlled environments. But the Stoics knew something we've forgotten: ease erodes resilience. So ask yourself tonight, what comfort can you temporarily set aside to reclaim your capacity for endurance, not as a permanent sacrifice, but as a drill? Like a boxer skipping rope or a violinist practicing scales, these small acts of voluntary discomfort are the repetitions that prepare you for life's main event. The Stoics didn't just endure hardship, they courted it in measured doses. So when real storms hit, they weren't survivors. They were sailors who already knew every inch of the ship. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "At dawn, when you have trouble getting out of bed, tell yourself, I have to go to work as a human being. What do I have to complain about if I'm going to do what I was born for?" That question cuts to the heart of Stoic purpose, not some grand, distant mission, but the daily alignment of action with virtue. The Stoics saw purpose not as a destination, but as the compass guiding every step. While modern culture glorifies busyness as a status symbol, the ancients measured worth by intentionality. A ship sailing in circles may look productive from the deck, but without a true heading, it's just burning fuel. Consider two blacksmiths. One hammers metal mindlessly, counting hours until payday. The other forges each blade as if it might save a life, knowing his craft honors the god of fire within him. Both perform identical labor, but the second transforms work into worship through purpose. This was the Stoic secret, infusing meaning into mundane acts. When Epictetus taught, "First say to yourself what you would be, then do what you have to do," he wasn't advocating wishful thinking. He was prescribing deliberate action, the kind that connects sweeping the floor to maintaining discipline, or answering emails to practicing integrity. Modern psychology confirms what the Stoics intuited. Studies on job crafting show that when employees reframe tasks as contributions to something larger, a cleaner hospital preventing infections, a teacher shaping futures, their performance and satisfaction soar. Purpose isn't about changing what you do, but redefining why you do it. The Roman statesman Cato would end each day by asking not, "What did I achieve?" but "What virtue did I exercise?" His metric wasn't productivity, but moral progress. Now examine your own routines. Does scrolling social media align with your value of growth? Does complaining about traffic nurture your commitment to patience? The Stoics weren't Puritans, they understood human frailty, but they also knew that wasted time accumulates like interest on a debt. Marcus kept a journal not to track accomplishments, but to audit his character. When you've done well and another has benefited, why seek a third reward like fools who demand applause for meeting basic standards? Here's the modern paradox. We have more tools for efficiency than any generation in history, yet often feel adrift in activity. The solution isn't doing more, but doing with more awareness. Try this tonight. Review one ordinary day through a Stoic lens. That rushed morning coffee, an opportunity to practice presence. The tedious meeting, a test of focus. The argument with your partner, a chance to exercise wisdom. Purpose isn't found in extraordinary moments, but in ordinary moments lived extraordinarily well. Zeno taught that virtue alone guarantees happiness because it's the only good completely within our control. When your actions spring from this understanding, procrastination melts, not from fear of failure, but from respect for your own potential. The Stoic with purpose rises early not because they must, but because they may. They endure hardships not because they're strong, but because challenges reveal what strength they've cultivated. Your deepest values aren't just ideals, they're the forge that shapes every choice, turning the lead of routine into the gold of meaning. criticism stings, there's no Stoic sugarcoating that. But here's the pivot. What if the pain isn't in the words themselves, but in the weight you choose to give them? Epictetus, the philosopher who endured slavery and disability, laid down a radical rule. If someone speaks badly of you, that's their problem. Your problem deciding whether to believe it. This isn't about ignoring feedback. It's about developing a filter so precise it catches gold while letting dirt fall through. Picture the Roman senator Epictetus, condemned by Emperor Nero for his Stoic principles. As the Senate read aloud false accusations against him, Epictetus didn't interrupt or defend himself. He simply kept carving wood, his knife stroke steady. When asked why, he replied, "I'm proving to you that what you call an offense, I call irrelevant." That's the Stoic art of discernment, recognizing that criticism only gains power when you stop to build it a throne. Modern psychology echoes this ancient wisdom. Studies show that high performers process feedback differently. They treat opinions like a buffet, taking only what nourishes their growth. A chef doesn't argue with every diner's Yelp review, but she might note recurring comments about oversalting. The Stoics would have called this prohaisis, the discipline of distinguishing what's yours to improve from what's merely someone else's noise. So how do you build this filter? Start by separating the source from the substance. Constructive criticism comes from those invested in your growth, a mentor's tough love, a coach's correction. Destructive criticism, it often leaks from those projecting their own insecurities. Marcus Aurelius had a litmus test. Ask yourself, what evidence does this person have? What evidence do I have? If your coworker calls you lazy after one missed deadline, but you've delivered 100 projects on time, their words aren't feedback, they're weather, passing clouds with no roots. Now, the deeper work. Audit whose opinions currently hold sway over you. Is it the boss who barely knows your role, the relative who measures success in outdated terms, the anonymous online troll? Write their names down, then ask, would I trade places with this person? If not, why let their judgment outweigh your own? The Stoics weren't suggesting arrogance, they practiced humility by considering wise counsel. But they also knew that chasing universal approval is like trying to paint a masterpiece by committee. Here's your daily drill. Next time criticism lands, pause, not to react but to triage. Is this pointing toward a truth you need to face? If yes, thank it like a stern teacher. If no, release it like a bad radio signal. The Stoics mastered this not through brute indifference, but by something far more powerful, the quiet confidence of someone who's already judged themselves by a higher standard. When you know your own measure, others' rulers become irrelevant. Imagine ending each day not with mindless scrolling, but with a deliberate conversation with your highest self. That's the power of Stoic journaling. Marcus Aurelius never intended his meditations for publication. Those pages were his private training ground, where he wrestled with weakness and sharpened his virtues in ink. What's striking isn't the elegance of his words, but their raw honesty, reminding himself to get out of bed without reluctance or questioning. Why feel anger at the world? As if the world would notice, this wasn't poetry, it was mental weightlifting. Your journal becomes your armor when you use it like a Stoic. Start with 3 prompts borrowed from the ancients. 1. What did I control today? Not the traffic jam, but your patience in it. Not your boss's mood, but your professionalism despite it. This question alone trains your brain to spot agency where you once saw only obstacles. 2. Where did I stray from virtue? Not guilt-tripping, but course-correcting. Seneca ended each day with this audit, writing, "The soul should be called to account daily." Missed a workout, admit it without drama, then strategize tomorrow's resistance. Lost your temper, trace the trigger like a philosopher detective. 3. What's one hard truth I'm avoiding? The Stoics called this premeditation of evils, not dwelling on darkness, but shining light on fears before they ambush you. Writing down "my business might fail" or "this relationship could end" strips them of their power to shock. The magic lies in consistency, not volume. Even 3 sentences nightly like Marcus' compact reflections compound into unshakable self-awareness. Modern research reveals why this works. Journaling about stressful experiences reduces activity in the amygdala, the brain's fear center. The Stoics didn't have Amor's, but they knew this truth firsthand. Thoughts disentangle themselves passing through lips and fingertips. Try this tonight. Grab any notebook and answer just one prompt with brutal honesty. No filters, no performative wisdom, just you facing you. Over time, you'll notice patterns emerging like constellations, recurring distractions, hidden strengths, self-deceptions crumbling under scrutiny. Your journal becomes both map and compass, revealing where you've drifted from your values and how to realign. Zeno taught that we're given 2 ears and 1 mouth so we might listen more than speak. Your journal gives you a 3rd gift, the space to hear your own voice clearly, undistorted by the world's noise. That's where true might is forged, not in grand declarations, but in the quiet dialogue between who you are and who you're becoming. Seneca once wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." That sentence cuts deeper the longer you sit with it. The Stoic practice of memento mori, remembering death, isn't about morbidity. It's the ultimate lens for sharpening focus. Picture this: if you knew you had exactly 1 year left, how would your days change? Not with grand gestures, but in the quiet elimination of trivialities. The meetings that could have been emails, the grudges that no longer serve you, the dreams you keep somedaying into the future. That's Stoic time management, treating hours like currency you can't earn back. History's most prolific creators understood this. Michelangelo, at 87, chiseled with one hand while holding a candle close to his failing eyes, whispering, "Ancora imparo, I am still learning." The Stoics would have recognized that urgency. When Marcus Aurelius reflected, "You could leave life right now," he wasn't dwelling on doom, he was igniting clarity. Mortality is the whetstone that hones priorities to a razor's edge. Modern psychology confirms this. Studies show that when people contemplate their limited time, they instinctively shift from abstract goals, "be successful," to concrete actions, "call mom" or "start the business." Now contrast that with how most of us spend our days, scrolling through infinite feeds while important projects gather dust, saying yes to obligations that drain us and later to passions that fuel us. Seneca called this poverty of the soul, not lacking time, but squandering it on distractions future historians won't even footnote. He wrote, "We are tight-fisted with property and money, yet think too little of wasting time, the one thing about which we should all be the toughest misers." Here's the pivot. Stoic productivity isn't about doing more, it's about doing what matters. Not filling every second, but ensuring each filled second aligns with your deepest values. Take the Japanese concept of ikigai, the intersection of what you love, what you're good at, what the world needs, and what you can be paid for. The Stoic version adds one final filter. Would this still matter if today were my last? That question collapses procrastination like a house of cards. So try this tonight. Grab a sheet of paper and draw 2 columns. Label the first postponed. List everything you've been putting off. That difficult conversation, the health checkup, the creative project. Label the second column reasons why. Then channel Epictetus. If the thing you're avoiding is within your power, why delay? If it's beyond your control, why worry? The gap between those columns is where your freedom lies. The challenge isn't to suddenly cram life into packed schedules, but to prune what doesn't belong. Like a sculptor chipping away excess marble to reveal the statue within, Memento Mori asks, what are you carving away to reveal your masterpiece? Not with frantic hustle, but with the steady hand of someone who knows the clock is ticking and treats that not as a threat, but as the gift that makes every moment count. Fear isn't the shadow of a threat, it's the shadow you cast by standing in your own light. Seneca saw this clearly when he wrote, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." Think about that, the sleepless nights before a job interview, the racing heart before a difficult conversation. How often does the anticipation dwarf the actual event? The Stoics called fear propathia, a first wave of emotion that only gains power if you feed it with attention. It's not the stage lights that paralyze a nervous speaker. It's the mental reel of stumbles and silence they've played on loop for weeks. Take the modern terror of public speaking. Surveys show it outranks fear of death for many. But here's what neuroscience reveals. The brain can't distinguish between vivid imagination and lived experience. When you rehearse disaster in your mind, forgetting lines, facing blank stares, you're not preparing for failure, you're practicing it. Seneca would have recognized this instantly. He described fear as a tax on anticipation, paid over and over for disasters that never arrive. The ancient remedy, premeditatio malorum, premeditation of evils. Not to dwell on worst-case scenarios, but to disarm them by asking, and then what? Picture a speaker who freezes mid-presentation. Their worst fear materializes. Now follow the thread. The audience waits patiently. A colleague offers water. The speaker takes a breath, finds their place, and continues. No one dies. No careers end. The monster under the bed turns out to be a dust bunny. This is the Stoic secret. Fear shrinks when exposed to logic. Marcus Aurelius practiced this by reminding himself, the cucumber is bitter. Throw it away, there are brambles in the path, go around. The obstacle isn't the bitterness or the thorns, it's the drama we layer on top. So what fear have you exaggerated in your mind? That risky career move, the vulnerability of opening up to someone, the possibility of rejection. Try this exercise. Write down your fear in blunt detail. Then annotate it with 2 columns, evidence for and evidence against. You'll often find the for column filled with what ifs, while the against column holds actual experience. The Stoics weren't denying real danger. They were insisting we separate genuine threats from mental ghosts. Consider the story of Admiral James Stockdale again, surviving years as a POW by distinguishing between what he could control, his resolve, and what he couldn't, his captor's actions. He later said, "You must never confuse faith that you will prevail in the end, which you can never afford to lose, with the discipline to confront the most brutal facts of your current reality." That's the balance, neither delusional optimism nor paralyzing dread, but clear-eyed courage. Your challenge tonight, pick one fear you've been avoiding. Not to conquer it immediately, but to sit with it like a Stoic scientist. Dissect its components. Ask, what's the actual cost if this happens? Often, you'll find the weight comes not from the fear itself, but from your resistance to facing it. Like a child who realizes the monster in the closet is just a coat rack, you'll discover that most fears lose their fangs under the steady gaze of reason. The goal isn't fearlessness, it's the wisdom to know which fears are warnings and which are illusions. And that's how you turn shadows into light. Gratitude isn't just a feeling, it's a discipline, a daily rebellion against the restless hunger of wanting more. Epictetus put it bluntly, wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants. That's the Stoic twist most miss. Gratitude isn't passive appreciation. It's active resistance against the illusion that happiness lies in the next purchase, promotion, or milestone. Picture two travelers, one pacing at the airport, furious over a delayed flight, the other sitting peacefully with a book. Same circumstance, different inner worlds. The difference: one believes contentment is conditional, the other has made peace with what is. The Stoics practiced gratitude like athletes train muscles, not just on sunny days, but especially in storms. Marcus Aurelius would begin his mornings by listing simple gifts. I got out of bed without pain. I have clean water to drink. My mind is clear enough to study wisdom. Not grand revelations, but grounding truths. Modern psychology confirms this ancient habit rewires the brain. Studies show that people who journal 3 daily gratitudes for just 3 weeks experience significant increases in optimism and decreases in stress hormones. The magic isn't in the act itself, but in the shift it creates, training attention to spot abundance where it once only saw lack. Now contrast this with consumer culture's relentless whisper: you'll be happy when you upgrade your phone, when you hit 6 figures, when you lose those last 10 pounds. The Stoics called this the infinite deferral of happiness, a treadmill where the finish line always moves. Seneca saw through it 2,000 years ago. It is not the man who has too little who is poor, but the one who craves more. Look around your home right now. The average person today lives with comforts kings couldn't imagine: electricity, antibiotics, fresh food at a tap, yet feels deprived because a neighbor owns a newer car. Here's your Stoic drill for tonight. Before sleep, ask 2 questions borrowed from Epictetus. 1. What did I already possess today that I once longed for? That job you stressed to land, the relationship you prayed to find, the health you took for granted before that scare last year. 2. What seemingly small thing made today possible? The electricity that powered your workspace, the street cleaners who cleared your commute, the centuries of knowledge allowing you to read these words. This isn't about ignoring life's real struggles, it's about reclaiming perspective. When the Stoic philosopher Epictetus said, "What progress have I made? I've begun to be a friend to myself," he was pointing to gratitude's deepest layer, not just thanking fate for external blessings, but appreciating your own growth. That's why gratitude journals fail when they become robotic lists. The practice only ignites when you pause to feel the warmth of coffee in your hands, the relief of a resolved conflict, the privilege of learning from a mistake. Zeno taught that happiness flows from living in agreement with nature. Part of that agreement, recognizing you already hold treasures that entire generations would have considered miracles. Your challenge isn't to manufacture gratitude, it's to strip away the distractions that make you blind to it. The next time you catch yourself thinking, "I'll be happy when," pause. Then whisper the Stoic antidote: "I could choose to be happy because," and watch the world rearrange itself before your eyes. Leadership through a Stoic lens isn't about titles or authority, it's about stewardship. Picture Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the ancient world, writing reminders to himself like, "It's ridiculous not to flee from your own wickedness, which is possible, but to flee from other people's wickedness, which is impossible." That's the heartbeat of Stoic leadership, radical self-accountability before demanding it of others. While modern leaders often fixate on vision statements and quarterly targets, the Stoics measured influence by something far quieter: the integrity of their inner dialogue. Consider the contrast between 2 executives. One obsesses over competitors' moves, frets about market volatility, and micromanages teams out of insecurity. The other anchors decisions in 4 Stoic questions. Is this just? Is this necessary? Is this within my control? Will this nurture the best in others? The first leader burns out their team chasing external validation. The second cultivates resilience by focusing on what's theirs to govern. Marcus modeled this daily. Despite commanding legions, he wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury. Not passive avoidance, but active elevation, a standard that transforms workplaces from battlegrounds into gardens." Modern leadership often conflates strength with dominance. The Stoics redefined it as self-mastery. When the Emperor Hadrian faced rebellion, he didn't retaliate with brute force. He walked unarmed into enemy camps, listening to grievances. That's Andrea, the Stoic virtue of courage tempered by wisdom. Compare that to today's toxic productivity culture, where leaders wear sleep deprivation like a badge of honor. Seneca would have called this folly. No one is able to rule unless he can also be ruled. Real authority isn't proven by how many all-nighters you pull, but by how clearly you see that your first duty is to govern your own impulses before guiding others. So how does this translate to your sphere? Start with the Stoic hierarchy of influence. 1. Master your mind. What biases or fears cloud your judgment? 2. Model your values. Does your calendar reflect your stated priorities? 3. Empower your team. Are you solving problems for people or equipping them to solve? A Stoic leader in a coffee shop shifts from barking orders to asking baristas, "What would make your shift smoother?" A teacher leads not by rigid lesson plans, but by adapting to students' needs without sacrificing standards. Leadership isn't about your position, it's about your posture. The ultimate test, adversity. When the stock market crashes or a project fails, most leaders scramble for scapegoats. The Stoic prepares differently. Like Marcus during the Antonine Plague, they ask, how can this challenge reveal our best selves? Not toxic positivity, but pragmatic optimism, the kind that built hospitals amid contagion and forged alliances from conflicts. Your leadership legacy won't be measured by flawless victories, but by how you helped others navigate storms with dignity. That's the Stoic difference, wielding power not to control outcomes, but to elevate everyone within your orbit. Decisions paralyze us not because the options are unclear, but because we're viewing them from the wrong altitude. The Stoics practiced something called the view from above, a mental shift where you imagine rising high enough to see your dilemma as a single thread in life's vast tapestry. Picture Marcus Aurelius standing at the Danube frontier, weighing whether to send troops into battle. From ground level, the choice was chaos, bloodshed, political fallout, personal doubt. But from the cosmic perspective, he cultivated what the Stoics called cosmopsis, the decision distilled to one question: does this align with justice, courage, and wisdom? Not, will this make me popular, or what if I fail, but is this right? History's defining moments often turned on this pivot. When Cato the Younger refused to compromise with Julius Caesar, sealing his own fate, it wasn't recklessness, it was virtue crystallized into action. He'd run the view from above beforehand. If I bend now, what precedent does that set for Rome? What does it teach my children about integrity? The technique works because it forces you to weigh decisions against something heavier than fleeting emotions, your core principles. Modern neuroscience confirms its power. Studies show that visualizing problems from a third-person perspective reduces bias and increases wise reasoning by nearly 30%. So how do you apply this? Start with the Stoic triad. 1. Zoom out. Imagine your dilemma from your deathbed. Will this choice feel trivial or pivotal? 2. Virtue test. Does option A embody more courage, justice, or wisdom than option B? 3. Legacy check. What ripple effects will this have beyond immediate consequences? Take a decision you've been avoiding, maybe leaving a stable job for a passion project. From ground level, fears scream, what if I fail? What will people think? Now ascend, see your life as a whole, the years spent playing it safe, the values you claim to cherish. Does staying honor your potential? Does leaving serve something greater than comfort? The view from above doesn't guarantee ease, it guarantees alignment. Epictetus warned, no great thing is created suddenly, any more than a bunch of grapes or a fig. The choices that shape destinies aren't made in frantic urgency, but in the quiet space above the storm. That crossroads you're facing, it's not just about today's turn. It's about who you become every time you let virtue, not fear, navigate. Success has a way of sanding down the edges of discipline. That's why Seneca warned, no wind favors he who has no destined port. It's easy to mistake external achievements for inner growth, to let applause soften the resolve that got you there in the first place. Think of a boxer who trains relentlessly for the title, only to lose it in his first defense because victory made him skip morning runs. The Stoics saw success not as a finish line, but as a test of character. When the crowd cheers, that's when the real work begins. History's most enduring figures understood this balance. George Washington, after winning the Revolutionary War, didn't seize power. He resigned his commission and returned to farming. That wasn't just politics, it was Stoic humility in action. He knew the same discipline that won the war would be eroded by unchecked ambition. Seneca observed this paradox in Rome's elite. They climbed the ladder only to find it leaning against the wrong wall. The trophies gathered dust while their peace of mind crumbled. Here's the uncomfortable question: has success ever made you softer? Maybe a promotion led to skipping the extra hours that earned it. Or a relationship milestone had you taking your partner for granted. The Stoic remedy isn't self-flagellation, it's a relentless return to first principles. Marcus Aurelius kept a slave whose sole job was to whisper in his ear during triumphs, "You're just a man." That ritual wasn't about shame, it was about staying grounded when the world tells you to float away. Modern research reveals why this humility matters. Studies of sudden wealth syndrome show lottery winners often spiral into depression, their identities unraveling without the structure of earned progress. Contrast that with artists like David Bowie, who after each album hit would deliberately take on a challenging new genre, not despite success, but because of it. He understood what the Stoics taught: growth stalls when you mistake a milestone for the journey's end. So how do you handle victory like a Stoic? Start with Seneca's nightly audit. What did today's wins reveal about my weaknesses? Maybe praise exposed your craving for validation. Maybe comfort revealed laziness waiting at the edges. This isn't about denying achievement. It's about ensuring success serves your evolution rather than replacing it. The true measure of any triumph isn't the applause it brings, but the quieter question it leaves behind. Now that you've arrived, will you continue becoming? The answer determines whether success is a stepping stone or a stopping point. The Stoics chose the former, knowing the greatest honor isn't in reaching heights, but in refusing to let them shrink your horizons. Musonius Rufus, the Stoic teacher who trained Epictetus, put it bluntly: neglect of the body is neglect of the mind. That statement cuts against our modern divide where we either worship physical perfection or dismiss it as vanity. The Stoics saw something deeper. Your body isn't just a vessel for your thoughts. It's the whetstone that sharpens them. Picture Marcus Aurelius rising before dawn for wrestling drills, not to win competitions, but to master discomfort. Or Cato the younger marching barefoot through Rome's streets in winter, not as performance, but as preparation for life's inevitable hardships. Their training wasn't about aesthetics, it was about integration. Consider the science behind this ancient wisdom. Studies show that regular physical exertion, especially under voluntary discomfort like cold exposure or endurance training, increases gray matter in brain regions responsible for emotional regulation and decision-making. When you push through a final set of squats or hold a plank past trembling muscles, you're not just building biceps, you're reinforcing neural pathways for perseverance. The Stoics called this ascesis, disciplined practice that bonds body and will. Modern psychology confirms it. Athletes who train with process-oriented goals maintain perfect form, develop greater resilience than those fixated on outcomes, lift heavier weights. The lesson: strength is a side effect of showing up. So where do you begin? Not with marathon plans or extreme regimes destined to flame out. Start with what Rufus called small but unbroken habits. 10 minutes of morning sun while reviewing your daily intentions. A 5-minute cold shower to practice breathing through discomfort. Bodyweight exercises performed not until exhaustion, but until focus wavers. That's your real rep count. The key is consistency over intensity. Seneca noted, "Every habit gathers strength by repetition, a truth visible in both muscle fibers and moral fiber." Here's your challenge for the next month: pair physical exertion with mental focus. Read philosophy while holding a wall sit. Recite Stoic mantras during a brisk walk. Use the burn in your lungs as a meditation anchor. The goal isn't to become a world-class athlete. It's to prove to yourself that discomfort is a dial you can adjust, not a wall you must crash into. When your legs shake during a lunge, that's your brain learning to override panic. When you choose water over soda, that's your will flexing. The Stoics reserved their harshest criticism for those who live in their heads, philosophers who debated virtue while neglecting vitality. True wisdom, they believed, flows through sinew as surely as synapse. Your body isn't separate from your philosophy. It's the proving ground where abstract principles become concrete action. So ask yourself tonight, what's one physical habit, no matter how small, that could become your daily ritual of resilience? Not for the sake of appearance, but for the quiet certainty that when life demands strength, you've already rehearsed the response. Wealth tests character more fiercely than poverty ever could. That's the Stoic paradox few see coming. Epictetus, born into slavery and later exiled, had a razor-sharp lens for examining money. Wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants. He wasn't dismissing material comforts. He was exposing the trap of believing they could ever belong to us permanently. Picture a traveler clutching a borrowed coat, insisting it's theirs while the true owner watches amused. That's how the Stoics viewed wealth: a temporary loan from fortune, never a possession to clutch. Consider the modern CEO who measures self-worth by net worth, only to crumble during a market crash. Contrast that with Warren Buffett, still living in the same modest house he bought in 1958 despite billions in wealth. The difference isn't in their bank accounts, but in their relationship to them. Buffett embodies Epictetus' teaching. It's not what you have, but what you can do without that defines your freedom. The Stoics divided the world into prohertic, what's ours to control, and aprohertic, what isn't. Money falls squarely in the second category. It can be gained or lost by factors beyond our will, but our use of money, that's where true ownership lies. Here's the litmus test. Has money ever dictated your choices? The job you hated but couldn't leave because of the salary? The relationship you tolerated for financial security? The dream you postponed waiting for enough in the bank? Seneca, one of Rome's wealthiest men, warned about this subtle slavery. Poor is not the person who has too little, but the one who craves more. He slept on hard beds and fasted regularly, not because he couldn't afford luxury, but to prove to himself he wasn't dependent on it. That's the Stoic art, wielding wealth as a tool like a hammer in a carpenter's hand, not worshipping it as the blueprint for happiness. Modern research echoes this ancient wisdom. Studies of lottery winners show their happiness spikes briefly, then returns to baseline, often lower. as newfound wealth fractures relationships and purpose. Meanwhile, psychological experiments reveal people who value time over money report greater life satisfaction. The Stoics would have nodded knowingly. Marcus Aurelius, despite ruling an empire, wrote, "Very little is needed to make a happy life." Not as platitude, but as precision, recognizing that once basic needs are met, excess becomes distraction. So how do you practice Stoic wealth today? Start with Epictetus' fork. 1. What's truly yours, your judgment, values, and capacity to adapt. 2. What's on loan, property, investments, even your next paycheck. Then audit one financial decision this week through this lens. That expensive car lease, is it serving your needs or your ego? The extra shift at work, is it funding freedom or deferring it? Money mastered is a bridge, money worshipped is a cage. Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, lost everything in a shipwreck and discovered philosophy in the wreckage. His greatest lesson wasn't about loss, it was about realizing he still had himself. Your bank balance will fluctuate, markets will rise and crash, but the ability to meet each turn with equanimity. That's the only currency that never depreciates. The next time you check your accounts, ask not, "How much do I have?" but "How much do I need?" The gap between those answers is where Stoic freedom lies. Social pressure doesn't push, it whispers. It's the unspoken rules at dinner parties where politics are avoided to keep peace, the laughter you force at a joke that crosses a line, the silence you choose when someone misrepresents your values. The Stoics faced this not as a minor discomfort, but as a battleground for integrity. Cato the Younger, the Roman senator who became a living symbol of Stoic defiance, would walk through Rome's streets dressed in simple tunics while nobles draped themselves in purple silk. When mocked for his outdated style, he replied, "Let them see virtue bear." His point wasn't about fashion, it was about refusing to let collective approval dictate his worth. Now picture a modern boardroom. The team laughs at a colleague's expense. You feel the tension, speak up and risk alienation, or laugh along and betray your conscience. That moment isn't just social discomfort, it's a fork in the road of character. Epictetus, born into slavery, understood this intimately. If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. Not because truth requires rudeness, but because the fear of standing alone often chains us to compromises that erode self-respect. The Stoic strategy here isn't confrontation for its own sake, it's clarity. Before entering any social space, Marcus Aurelius would remind himself, "What do I bring to this, my principles or my need to be liked?" That simple question acts as an anchor. When peers pressure you to overspend on a luxury you can't afford, or co-workers normalize cutting corners, the issue isn't the money or the ethics alone. It's the unconscious trade of your autonomy for temporary belonging. Consider how Cato handled Caesar's rising tyranny. While other senators switched allegiances to save their lives or status, Cato stood firm, declaring, "I would rather be right than be king." His defiance wasn't reckless, it was calculated conviction. He'd run the Stoic cost-benefit analysis. Temporary safety bought by moral compromise was a debt the soul couldn't afford. Modern research validates this ancient insight. Studies on social conformity show that while going along with the group activates dopamine-driven relief, resisting for principle triggers deeper satisfaction, what psychologists call authentic pride. So where do you bend too easily? Maybe it's nodding along when friends gossip, or staying silent on issues that matter to avoid debate. The test isn't in grandstands, but in daily micro-resistances. Try this for 1 week. Note every time you suppress an opinion or action to fit in. Then ask Seneca's question, if everyone thought this way, what world would result? The gap between that answer and your silence is where Stoic courage begins to grow. The key lies in preparation. Just as athletes train before games, Stoics rehearsed for social tests. Musonius Rufus had students practice defending unpopular truths in mock debates. You can adapt this role-play saying, "I disagree," to minor opinions first, preferring tea over coffee, or a film everyone hated. These small stakes build the muscle for bigger stands. Here's the paradox the Stoics uncovered. The more you honor your inner compass, the less you need external validation. Like a tree deepening its roots during storms, each act of integrity, whether noticed or not, anchors you against life's winds. Social pressure doesn't vanish, it just loses its power to uproot you. And that's how you turn whispers into strength. The people you surround yourself with aren't just company, they're the invisible architects of your character. Seneca put it bluntly, associate with those who will make you better. Welcome those whom you yourself can improve. That's the Stoic circle of influence in action. Relationships as mutual workshops for virtue, not just sources of comfort or convenience. Picture two gardens side by side. One is tended daily with nutrient-rich soil and careful pruning. The other is left to weeds and neglect. Your mind, like those gardens, thrives or withers based on what you allow to take root in your inner circle. History's greatest Stoics didn't cultivate resilience alone. Marcus Aurelius had Rusticus, the mentor who introduced him to philosophy. Cato the Younger surrounded himself with fellow republicans who valued integrity over political gain. Even Epictetus, despite his exile, built a school where students sharpened each other like iron against iron. Contrast that with modern habits, squandering hours with colleagues who complain but never create, or friends who numb ambitions with empty distractions. The Stoics measured relationships by a simple standard. Does this person help me become who I aspire to be, or do they tempt me to settle for less? Consider Seneca's letters to Lucilius, filled with challenges to think deeper and act nobler. That's the mark of a virtuous friendship, not just shared interests, but shared growth. Meanwhile, toxic relationships operate like emotional vampires. They drain your energy with constant crises, reinforce negative thought patterns, and subtly erode your values. The Roman statesman Cicero, though not a Stoic, captured this perfectly. A friend is, as it were, a second self. The question isn't whether someone is pleasant to be around, but whether their presence helps you recognize and honor your best self. Here's your Stoic audit. List the 5 people you've spent the most time with this month. Now imagine future versions of yourself shaped by each relationship. Would that version be wiser, kinder, more courageous, or resigned, cynical, stretched thin? This isn't about cutting people off ruthlessly. Stoicism teaches compassion, but it also demands honesty. Some relationships need boundaries, others need reinvestment, and a rare few deserve your undivided attention because they mirror the virtues you're striving to embody. Zeno taught that we're born with the seeds of greatness, but they only grow in the right environment. Who in your life waters those seeds versus salting the soil? The answer determines more than your mood, it shapes your destiny. Surround yourself with those who speak truth even when it stings, who model patience in chaos, and who remind you by their very presence that excellence isn't an ideal but a daily practice. That's the circle that turns philosophy into lived wisdom. Your phone buzzes another notification, another tug at your attention. The average person checks their device over 90 times a day, fragmenting focus into scattered moments. The Stoics faced different distractions, chariot races, gossip in the agora, but their remedy applies perfectly to our digital chaos. If you seek tranquility, do less, wrote Marcus Aurelius. Not nothing, but less, because what drains us isn't activity, It's the illusion of multitasking, the myth that we can simultaneously scroll, work, and think deeply. Digital minimalism isn't about abandoning technology. It's about wielding it with the same intentionality the Stoics brought to every action. Consider Seneca's advice to Lucilius: your mind will take the shape of what you frequently hold in thought. Now measure that against today's reality, endless feeds shaping your thoughts through algorithms designed to hijack attention. The Stoics practiced prosauch, vigilant attention to mental inputs. They'd recoil at how casually we let strangers' opinions, sensationalized news, and viral trivialities colonize our inner space. Epictetus warned, "You become what you give your attention to." Imagine applying that filter before unlocking your phone. Would you still open that app if you knew it was molding your character? Here's the Stoic experiment for digital clarity. For 1 week, turn your home screen into a temple of intentionality. Keep only tools that serve virtue maps for navigation, messaging for true connection, notes for reflection. Move everything else into a folder labeled distractions. Notice what happens when tapping Instagram requires a conscious scroll rather than muscle memory. This isn't deprivation. It's the modern equivalent of Cotto choosing plain clothing amid Roman excess, a deliberate barrier against thoughtless consumption. The philosopher Pascal observed that all human misery stems from our inability to sit quietly in a room alone. Today, we've outsourced that discomfort to devices. Every idle moment gets filled with podcasts, social feeds, or videos, what the Stoics would call avoiding yourself. Try this counter-ritual: leave your phone at home during a walk. At first, mental withdrawal symptoms scream for stimulation, but soon something remarkable happens. You start hearing your own thoughts again. That's not just quiet, it's the rediscovery of your inner dialogue, the voice that gets drowned in digital noise. Epictetus offered a litmus test for distractions. Does this bring me closer to the person I aspire to be? Apply that to your next YouTube binge or Twitter argument. The answer isn't always no. Sometimes research or meaningful debate qualifies, but often you'll find mindless engagement masquerading as productivity. The Stoic solution: craft a personal attention constitution. Write down 3 activities that genuinely enrich your mind: reading philosophy, deep work, face-to-face conversation, and 3 that drain it: doom scrolling, comparison traps, clickbait debates. When reaching for your phone, ask which category the next action falls into. Zeno taught that happiness flows from living in agreement with nature. In our age, that includes recognizing technology as neither savior nor villain, just a tool whose power depends on the hand that holds it. The notification you ignore today strengthens your capacity to focus on what matters tomorrow, because reclaiming your might doesn't mean rejecting modernity. It means mastering your attention so fiercely that every swipe, click, and scroll becomes a choice, not a reflex. The question lingers: what digital thread will you cut to weave a more intentional life? The day doesn't end when the sun sets, it crystallizes. Seneca, the Stoic philosopher who advised emperors, treated each evening as sacred ground for self-confrontation. His ritual wasn't elaborate, just a candle, a wax tablet, and 3 piercing questions. When the light has been removed and my wife has fallen silent, he wrote, I examine my entire day and measure my words and deeds. That quiet audit wasn't about guilt, it was about alignment. Like a blacksmith inspecting his tools for cracks, Seneca knew daily where could dull even the sharpest character if left unchecked. Here's how to adapt his practice tonight. Start with the first question: where did I act in alignment with my principles today? Not grand achievements, but moments of integrity. The email you didn't send in anger, the extra effort no one noticed, the patience shown when frustration beckoned. The Stoics called these katorthemata, right actions that strengthen moral muscle. Record 1, however small. Modern psychology confirms why this works. Focusing on positive behaviors reinforces neural pathways for repetition. Now turn the lens inward with Seneca's second probe. Where did I stray from virtue? Not to self-flagellate, but to diagnose. Maybe you snapped at a colleague, procrastinated on a promise, or indulged in complaint. The key lies in dissection. Was it fatigue, pride, or unchecked impulse? Epictetus taught that errors are like misdrawn geometry. You don't erase the whole slate, just correct the faulty line. Write the misstep, then script a better response for next time. This isn't dwelling on failure, it's installing mental software updates. The final question is the most transformative. What did today teach me about what I truly value? A rushed morning might reveal you prioritize productivity over presence. A disagreement could expose hidden people-pleasing. Marcus Aurelius framed this as separating the spark from the smoke, the core lesson from the distracting drama. Perhaps a cancelled plan left you relieved, hinting at overcommitment, or a moment of joy came unexpectedly, pointing to neglected priorities. Tonight, try this with just today's events. No need for lengthy prose bullet points suffice. The power lies in consistency, not volume. Like a sculptor reviewing each day's chiseled strokes, you'll start spotting patterns, recurring distractions, hidden strengths, rationalizations masquerading as reasons. Over time, these nightly dialogues become your inner compass, recalibrating your course long before you drift far. Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, compared self-reflection to a bowstring. Regular checking prevents snapping under tension. Your evening ritual isn't about judgment, it's about liberation. Every examined day is a step toward the unshakable confidence that comes from knowing your actions match your aspirations. The candle may flicker, but the light it casts on your character only grows brighter. Betrayal cuts deeper than anger because it carries the sting of broken trust, like handing someone a knife handle first, only to feel the blade. Marcus Aurelius, who faced treason from his closest generals during war, wrote, "When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly." This wasn't cynicism, it was immunization. By acknowledging human fallibility up front, he prevented disappointment from festering into resentment. The Stoic approach to betrayal hinges on a radical shift, recognizing that others' actions reflect their character, not your worth. Consider the Roman general Scipio Africanus, who conquered Carthage only to be falsely accused of embezzlement by political rivals. Instead of lashing out, he retired to his estate, telling his supporters, "Ingratitude is the price of serving fools." His response embodied Stoic indifference not to the injustice itself, but to its power to derail his peace. Modern psychology echoes this. Studies show that ruminating on betrayal activates the same brain regions as physical pain, while forgiveness, defined as releasing the demand for amends, reduces cortisol levels. The Stoics would have framed it as reclaiming sovereignty. The betrayer controls their actions, you control your interpretation. So how do you practice this? Start with Marcus' question, what's the virtue here? If a friend leaks your secret, the virtue isn't in excusing their behavior, but in refining your discernment. If a partner cheats, the growth lies not in revenge, but in understanding why you entrusted your happiness to someone else's fidelity. This isn't victim blaming, it's agency building. Epictetus, betrayed by his own slave before gaining freedom, taught, "It's not what happens to you, but how you relate to what happens that matters." Now reflect, what betrayal still lives rent-free in your mind? The colleague who stole credit, the family member who broke a promise. The Stoic remedy has 2 steps. First, write the event factually, no adjectives, just actions. X shared Y after agreeing to secrecy. Then ask, how does holding this serve me? Like carrying a burning coal hoping the other person gets blistered, the weight only injures you. Forgiveness here isn't absolution. It's recognizing that justice is often imperfect, and your peace is too valuable to hinge on others' repentance. History's ultimate betrayal lesson comes from Seneca, whose student Nero, the man he tutored since childhood, ordered his death. Facing execution, Seneca didn't rage or beg. He turned to his grieving wife and said, "What need is there to weep over parts of life? The whole of it calls for tears." That's Amorfati in its purest form, embracing even treachery as part of life's tapestry. Your betrayals, large or small, aren't exceptions to humanity's rule, they're confirmations of it. The healing begins when you stop demanding the world be otherwise and start building inner citadels no disloyalty can breach. Society tells us aging is a problem to solve, wrinkles to erase, years to regret, vitality to mourn. The Stoics flipped this script with radical clarity. Life's phases aren't thieves stealing your youth, they're chapters in a story only you can write. Seneca's On the Shortness of Life cuts to the bone. It's not that we have too little time, but that we waste so much of it. His target wasn't mortality itself, but the delusion that aging is the enemy rather than the natural rhythm of existence. Picture two men standing at 50. One laments fading stamina while clinging to college glory days. The other, like the Roman farmer Cincinnatus, leaves political power at 80 to return to plowing his fields, finding dignity in every season. The difference isn't in their years, but in their perspective. Modern culture treats aging like a shipwreck, something to delay or disguise at all costs. The Stoics saw it as a vineyard. Grapes don't weep for their unripe greenness in June, nor dread their eventual fermenting in autumn. Each stage serves its purpose. Marcus Aurelius, ruling Rome in his late 50s while battling chronic illness, wrote, "The longest life and the shortest come to the same end, not to dismiss longevity, but to spotlight how we fill our days." A century spent chasing hollow pleasures is poverty. 50 years of purposeful growth is wealth. Research from Harvard's longevity study confirms this ancient wisdom. Relationships, purpose, and engagement, not Botox or fad diets, correlate most strongly with life satisfaction in later years. Seneca's remedy for aging anxiety wasn't denial, but deep immersion. He urged his readers to gather and save your time by pruning trivial pursuits. Imagine an hourglass. The sand at the top represents your remaining days. Most people spend it fixated on the narrowing waist, counting grains with dread. The Stoic focuses instead on ensuring each falling grain lands meaningfully. That's why Seneca admired his mentor Atticus, who took up new languages in his 70s. No one loses the years already lived. All past time is stored safely in memory's vault. Aging steals nothing unless you've been living on autopilot. Here's your challenge tonight. Perform a life audit, not by years past, but by attention invested. List 3 periods of your life so far: early struggles, pivotal achievements, recent transitions. For each, ask, did I fully inhabit that season, or was I distracted by longing for another? The answer reveals where you've already mastered Stoic presence and where you might still be hostage to when/then thinking. A woman who spent her 30s yearning for marital stability might realize she missed her children's fleeting laughter. A retiree obsessed with lost productivity might overlook the freedom to mentor or create. Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, taught until his death at 98. Proving vitality isn't bound by youth but by engagement. His student Cleans carried water by night to support his studies, showing that hardship in one season fuels wisdom for the next. Your wrinkles aren't cracks in your foundation. They're etchings of storms weathered and joys earned. The next time you catch yourself mourning faded quickness or changing stamina, replace "I've lost" with "I've gained." Lost sprinting speed, gained patience. Lost reckless passion, gained discernment. This isn't positive thinking, it's accurate accounting. The final Stoic test is this: if you could magically return to any age but had to relive it with your current mindset, would you still choose youth? Or would you recognize that the perspective you've earned is the real prize? Aging doesn't diminish you, it distills you. Like wine or whiskey, your value doesn't lie in staying grape juice forever, but in deepening into something richer with time. Public speaking terrifies more people than death itself, a paradox the Stoics would dissect with clinical precision. What if the anxiety isn't about the act of speaking, but the illusion of control we've attached to it? Epictetus, the philosopher who transformed his stutter into a weapon of clarity, laid down the law: you are responsible for the effort, not the outcome. That single sentence unravels the knot in every nervous speaker's stomach. The shaking hands, the dry mouth, they're not fear of the audience, but fear of failing to control the audience's reaction. Take the modern TED Talk phenomenon. The most viral speakers aren't those with flawless delivery, but those who radiate authentic engagement. Susan Cain's iconic quiet voice during her talk on introversion didn't weaken her message, it proved it. The Stoics would have recognized this as proherses in action, focusing solely on what's yours to govern preparation, sincerity, while releasing what isn't applause, criticism. Neuroscience confirms this ancient insight. Brain scans show that when speakers shift focus from "how am I performing" to "what can I offer," their amygdala activity plummets while prefrontal engagement soars. Preparation for a Stoic isn't about memorizing lines until they're robotic, but about internalizing the core truth you're there to share. Marcus Aurelius wrote his meditations not as speeches, but as conversations with himself, raw, unrehearsed, yet profoundly impactful. Apply that to your next presentation. Distill your message into one sentence you defend to the death. Once you have that anchor, technical stumbles become irrelevant. The audience might forget your slides, but they'll remember your conviction. Here's the reframe that changes everything: every speaking opportunity is a training ground for virtue. The cue and a session where someone challenges you, that's patience in action. The tech malfunction forcing you to improvise, a test of adaptability. Even the silent listener scrolling their phone becomes a lesson in detachment. Your worth isn't measured by their attention span. Now the real challenge: where in your life are you silencing yourself unnecessarily? Maybe it's hesitating to voice an unpopular opinion at work, or biting back truth to keep family peace. This week, pick one arena where you've been mute when you should have been resonant. Not to conquer fear in one grand moment, but to practice the Stoic triad: prepare thoroughly, speak authentically, and let the reaction belong to others. The goal isn't eloquence, it's the unshakable calm of knowing you've done your part, regardless of who claps or walks out. A journey isn't measured in miles, but in attention paid. That's the Stoic traveler's creed. Marcus Aurelius spent nearly half his reign on horseback, leading military campaigns across the empire's frontiers. Yet his personal writings reveal a man who treated each march not as a disruption, but as a mobile classroom. When you find yourself forced into some chaos, he scribbled in his tent one evening, "Remember, you can retreat into yourself anytime." That portable tranquility became his compass. While his soldiers saw only the dust of foreign roads, Marcus observed the universal patterns of human nature: greed in besieged cities, courage in wounded comrades, vanity in victorious generals. His journals from the front lines weren't battle plans, they were philosophical field notes. Modern travel often inverts this wisdom. We race through airports chasing boarding times, cram itineraries with checklist attractions, then return home exhausted not by the journey but by our resistance to it. The tourist snaps photos to prove they were there. The Stoic traveler absorbs experiences to prove they were present. Consider two approaches to visiting Rome's Colosseum. One person elbows through crowds for the perfect selfie, then rushes to the next landmark. Another pauses where gladiators once stood, reflecting on Seneca's words about spectators who demand slaughter while claiming moral superiority. Both see the same stones, but only one encounters history's echo. The Stoic Art of Travel begins with a simple shift, treating delays not as thieves of time but as unexpected classrooms. A cancelled flight becomes an opportunity to practice patience. A language barrier transforms into a lesson in nonverbal connection. Even jet lag, that disorienting price of crossing time zones, mirrors Epictetus' teaching about adapting to circumstances beyond our control. Marcus often wrote about finding the gift in the obstacle, whether it was a muddy road forcing slower progress and deeper observation, or an illness that sharpened his appreciation for health. Here's how to cultivate this mindset on your next trip. Start with what the Stoics called vigilant awareness. Before stepping onto the plane or into the train, set an intention. I will notice 3 details most rush past. Maybe it's the way locals greet each other in the market, or the play of light on ancient cobblestones at dusk. Then, each evening, emulate Marcus by journaling not just what you did, but what you learned about the place, its people, and your own reactions. Did a detour through a poor neighborhood unsettle you? That's a mirror showing hidden biases. Did a stranger's kindness lift your spirits? There's proof of humanity's shared threads. The ultimate test comes when plans unravel. The Stoic traveler doesn't curse the rain that ruins a beach day. They recall Seneca weathering storms at sea. A man is as wretched as he has convinced himself to be. In that moment, you might duck into a cafe and strike up a conversation with the owner, discovering stories no guidebook holds. Or you might simply sit by the window, watching raindrops trace paths on the glass, a reminder that sometimes the richest journeys happen when you stay still. So next time your passport gets stamped, carry this question like a talisman. Am I collecting miles or meaning? The difference determines whether you return with souvenirs or with wisdom etched into your character. Waiting for inspiration is the artist's version of praying for rain in a drought. Seneca saw through this illusion when he wrote, "No man was ever wise by chance." The blank page, the empty canvas, the silent instrument. They don't respond to wishes, only to hands showing up day after day. History's most enduring creators understood this. Michelangelo chiseling at dawn before the marble dust settled. Beethoven composing even as deafness tightened its grip. Mary Oliver crafting poems like daily prayers regardless of whether the muse whispered or stayed silent. The difference between a dream and a masterpiece isn't genius. It's the quiet accumulation of disciplined hours when no one's applauding. Procrastination thrives on the myth of perfect conditions, the belief that creativity flows only when the stars align. The Stoics called this akrasia, the weakness of will that postpones action for an imaginary future where motivation magically appears. Contrast this with the routine of author Haruki Murakami, who compares writing to tunneling through rock. You sit down every day at the same time, and little by little you chip away. That's Stoic discipline in action, showing up not because you feel inspired, but because you've pledged allegiance to the work itself. Seneca's letters reveal his own daily ritual, writing early, editing late, treating words like a blacksmith treats iron, heat and hammer until they hold shape. Imagine your creative work as a Stoic training ground. Each time you resist the siren call of distractions to focus, you're strengthening enkrateia, self-mastery. Every session where you persist through frustration builds criteria, endurance. Even failure becomes fertile soil. Seneca noted that rough drafts are like seedlings crushed by passing feet, only to rise stronger. The goal isn't flawless output, it's the integrity of the process. When novelist Octavia Butler insisted, "Forget inspiration, habit is more dependable," she echoed Epictetus' teaching. First say to yourself what you would be, then do what you have to do. Now the pivot from philosophy to practice. That project haunting your thoughts, the unwritten novel, the half-built business, the neglected sketchbook, doesn't need your inspiration. It needs your commitment. Start with what the Stoics called micro-ascesis, 15 minutes daily, no exceptions. Not a marathon session to compensate for weeks of avoidance, but a small, unbroken chain of effort. Writer Annie Dillard captured this perfectly. How we spend our days is, of course, how we spend our lives. The pages you fill, the lines you code, the chords you practice today are the only real measure of your creative might. So tonight, light a candle like Seneca at his desk, not for ambience but as a silent witness to your discipline. Ask yourself, what will future me regret not starting today? Then begin, not grandly but faithfully. The muse doesn't reward those who wait, she bows to those who work. Legacy isn't about etching your name in stone, it's about shaping the hands that will carve the future. Epictetus, the Stoic philosopher who taught while standing on crippled legs, put it bluntly: what survives of us isn't fame or wealth, but the wake of our virtue. He wasn't dismissing accomplishment, he was redefining it. Imagine two ripples in a pond. One comes from a pebble tossed for show, spectacular splash, quick fade. The other radiates from a stone anchored deep, its currents shifting the water long after it's sunk. That's the difference between chasing recognition and cultivating influence. The Stoics measured immortality not in statues, but in the quiet continuity of wisdom passed like a torch. Take Zeno of Citium, founder of Stoicism, whose legacy wasn't in the books he wrote, none survived intact, but in the disciples he mentored. Cleans, the water carrier, Chrysippus, the former athlete who carried his teachings forward through generations. Contrast that with Nero, whose name echoes through history as a cautionary tale. Both men sought immortality. One grasped it through tyranny, the other through transmission. The Stoic question isn't, will they remember me, but what will they remember through me? Modern culture obsesses over digital footprints, likes, follows, viral moments. The Stoics would have recognized this as another illusion of control. Marcus Aurelius never intended his meditations for publication. They were private exercises in self-governance. Yet 2 millennia later, his words guide soldiers, CEOs, and prisoners. That's the paradox of legacy. It blossoms most richly when tended without calculation. Like a tree that doesn't fret over where its seeds will land, your deepest impact often grows from simply being rooted in truth. So how do you audit your own ripple effect? Start with Epictetus' litmus test. If you vanished tomorrow, what current would keep moving without you? Maybe it's the colleague who adopted your calm under pressure, or the child who internalized your resilience during hardship. These are your true monuments, not plaques or promotions, but living patterns woven into others' choices. The Roman statesman Cato trained his son not with lectures, but by letting the boy watch him endure political attacks with unbroken integrity. That lesson outlasted empires. Now the uncomfortable mirror. Does your daily life align with the legacy you claim to value? The parent who wants to be remembered for patience but snaps at spilled milk. The leader who preaches empowerment but micromanages. This gap isn't hypocrisy, it's the raw material for growth. The Stoics called this prokopton, the practice of progressive alignment. Each time you choose patience over irritation, honesty over convenience, you're not just acting virtuously, you're compounding interest in your spiritual inheritance. Fame is fickle, impact is inevitable. Every interaction deposits something, a word, a gesture, a standard upheld or compromised. Seneca wrote letters to Lucilius not knowing we'd read them centuries later. He simply tended the garden of his character, trusting the fruit would nourish whoever needed it. Your legacy isn't a eulogy to be written, it's a life being inscribed daily in the margins of other stories. The pen is in your hands, but the ink is your example. Discipline, resilience, purpose, these are the three pillars of Stoic might, the unshakable foundation for radical transformation. But here's the truth no one tells you. They're not traits you're born with. They're muscles forged through daily repetitions of choice. Every time you choose the harder path over the comfortable one, you're strengthening discipline. Every setback met with calm analysis instead of panic. That's resilience under construction. And purpose, it's not some distant North Star. It's the compass you calibrate each morning when you ask, what kind of person will today demand I become? Marcus Aurelius faced empire-shattering crises, yet his private writings reveal a man more concerned with mastering his own mind than controlling external events. You have power over your mind, not outside events. He reminded himself, that's the Stoic secret in one razor-sharp sentence. Real might isn't about dominating others. It's about governing the one thing truly yours, your judgments, actions, and reactions. The emperor on his battlefield and the single parent navigating a hectic morning are playing the same game, turning chaos into clarity, obstacles into fuel. So where do you start? Not with grand overhauls, but with micro-victories. Tonight, pick just one Stoic practice to begin. Maybe it's the evening audit, 3 honest questions about your day's alignment with virtue. Or perhaps the morning ritual of negative visualization, mentally rehearsing challenges to disarm their sting. It could be as simple as inserting a Stoic pause before reacting to provocation, breathing through those 6 crucial seconds while your prefrontal cortex catches up. Transformation doesn't demand perfection, just persistent direction. As Marcus wrote in his final days, the happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts. That's the invitation Stoicism extends, to stop waiting for the world to change and start sculpting the mind that engages with it. Your might isn't measured by what happens to you, but by what happens through you. The tools are here, the time is now. Which practice will you wield first? For more Stoic strategies to conquer life's battles, hit subscribe. Your next dose of ancient wisdom awaits.